That's right, Scott and Tess. On top of coordinating with law enforcement to keep students safe today, schools are unifying in one message to encourage students to go to class today. And brand new at 7, we're hearing from the state's top educator about today's protests. Superintendent Tom Horn just released a statement saying, quote, students have the First Amendment right to peacefully protest, but it should be done after school hours. Teachers and other school personnel should not be a part of protests during class time. I talked to the executive director of Arizona School Administrators, an organization that usually does not align with the state superintendent, but they do seem to agree about these protests.
It's also a balance of freedom of expression, First Amendment rights versus maintaining safe and orderly environments. You don't want anything that would inhibit that or compromise the safety of the students and staff, either on their way to or from that school or in that school.
If a student calls or walks out of class today, schools will mark them as absent. Several walkouts are expected in the next few hours, so stay with Arizona's Family on air and on your phones to get the latest developments.